Good morning, everyone. This is the morning meeting. Dan, Sean, or Sean's empty chair, and I will walk you through the day. Sean will be right back. You have to step away, but Sean will be back soon. And the three of us are going to walk you through the day. It's a big day with the tariffs, and there's some political things floating around, some stuff on TikTok. So we'll walk you through everything that's going on, kick it around ourselves, and then welcome those of you who are here on the two-way platform to join us. So if you'd like to be in the conversation, please raise your electronic hand to get in the queue. Some of you already have. We'd love new people as always. We love old people, young people, all sorts of people. So please raise your hand. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, thank you for watching. Don't put smack in the chat. Adhere to our ethos of peace, love, and understanding, and perhaps figure out how to join us here on the two-way platform and be part of the conversation. Very grateful to all of you. Tariffs is a big emotional topic for many, and we'd love to hear from folks here who think these tariffs are a good idea, and maybe from folks who don't. So please participate when the time comes. The president today is there are rumors he's going to have a press conference. I'll tell you that. It's not on his public schedule. I don't know. I don't usually like to word rumors. There's wispy sensibility that he might have a press conference. So in if you put up his public schedule, he's got not doesn't have a lot going on until he leaves for here it is. So pool call 9 a.m. So the pool is there at this hour, but he doesn't get his intelligence briefing till 1 o'clock. And then he departs for Andrews and he heads down to Florida for a dinner for his golf thingy, LIV, tonight at his golf club in Florida. And then he's at Mar-a-Lago through the weekend. So we may see the president today. And of course, if he doesn't have the rumored press conference or press availability in the Oval, he could talk on the departure to Andrews. He could talk on the plane down to Florida. So if you were a betting person, I would bet you we hear from the president at some point today. But again, as of now, nothing. The vice president talked this morning in an interview with Fox News, Fox and Friends. We'll show you a bit of that in a moment. A lot on tariffs, a little bit on immigration, a little bit on politics, and a little bit on TikTok. And we'll show you some of that. House is not voting this week because the speaker is trying to figure out what to do about the rebels in his party who are trying to take over the floor. The Senate is in session. They're doing a bunch of stuff, including confirming Dr. Oz. Nothing huge and gigantic. Lots of cabinet activity on morning television and flooding out to sell the tariff idea. Lots of consultations with the cabinet members and White House officials related to tariff. Secretary of State is in Brussels meeting with his Asian and European counterparts on the sidelines and at a NATO meeting of foreign ministers. So again, if you want to be on the conversation, please raise your hand. There's so much we could talk about tariffs. I want to tell you my theory. It's an informed theory, and it's not brand new. There are other people who have it, which is everybody's looking for off ramps, and to the extent the market doesn't crash at 9:30, and the overnight future suggests it's going to drop significantly, it's because people think, well, by the weekend the president's going to start doing deals. I believe that the entire tariff thing is a play to force the hand of congressional Republicans to pass reconciliation quickly. That the forcing mechanism is to say, we got to get this done to change the subject. We got to get this done to do stuff that unites us and will be good for the economy in the short term, tax cuts, energy deregulation more generally, and that there's not going to be a major off-ramp move on the tariffs until reconciliation passes in the next 9 weeks. And that allows the president to get his major piece of legislation done because congressional Republicans will be told, we got to pass this because look at all these negative headlines. Look at the recession talk. Sean, what do you think of my theory?
Sometimes you can be right without being right. That may happen, but I don't think that's the motive. In fact, I would tell you that in part of the reason that some of the stuff was delayed and that there were no leaks is that the plan for the staff was, I think, a little bit more targeted and restrained, and the president wanted to go full bore on this. This is something that, and I've maintained this, that he even said it yesterday. This is not something that he has just come lately to. He's believed in his gut about these things for a long time. I think a byproduct might be it becomes a forcing mechanism, but I don't think that was the strategy going into this.
Well, just to be clear, I don't think it's the only reason he's doing it, but I think it is part of a macro strategy. Dan, what do you think of my theory?
Well, Scott Bessent, I think, said overnight or today that the debt ceiling may now be breached much sooner, which of course would be another action forcing mechanism.
Okay, go ahead and put that up. This is consistent with my theory, right? He can decide not only when the debt ceiling's breached, because there's so much wiggle room, put up the best in quote, but he can also say, I don't want to do any more extraordinary measures
Right.
because all the extraordinary measures are bad for the economy. There's bipartisan consensus. When the Treasury Secretary does extraordinary things to keep the debt ceiling from being breached, to extend it out, it's bad. So here he's saying to Bloomberg, and this is one of the pieces of data I was using, federal government's at risk of running out of room to make payment as soon as May or June. The range we've been given is like previously, I believe, was
September. Yeah, August.
It's like August to October. So this is moving it up substantially. And again, he says if the debt ceiling is resolved via reconciliation, then it has to be done before the so-called X date. This is why I say I agree. I don't want to overstate it. It's not the only reason the president wants to do tariffs, but this is part of my theory that this is why everything's moving fast, because the Republicans know they must change the subject. They must pass things that voters can say without explanation are good for the economy.
I think Mark, I think the only challenge with this, because I could see this, it makes sense, is if the pain starts getting great, if we have 2 months of, if inflation goes to 5, 6, 7%, GDP starts to dramatically slow, members of Congress start hearing from local businesses, you're asking everyone to stick together. Like the storm's getting really, really rough, the seas are choppy, and everyone hold hands. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes people start saying, I'm going down.
But that's going to be true no matter when they try to pass
Agreed.
reconciliation.
Yep.
This is going to focus their mind.
Yep.
To say we're all got to stick together. We're in the foxhole, and they all want most of what's going to be in reconciliation. They don't love all of it, but they all want most of what's in it.
Correct.
So there's another massive X factor here that I think will come to fruition in the next 48 hours. The president used and the emergency powers to do this. And if you listen to what members of his cabinet said afterwards, the devil was in the detail about negotiating. And this is the same issue that they faced with Canada and Mexico. If you claim emergency powers, then it makes negotiating a lot harder, right? So you can't claim there's a fentanyl crisis and then say reduce your tariffs by X. You have to tie it to the fentanyl action, right? Because you're a WTO member, and there are issues for this. This is way wonky, but understand this. The president chose not to go the 301 route, which would have entailed reports on unfair trade practices. It would have taken a lot longer, but he would have been on a lot stronger ground by using emergency powers. This is why I say the next 48 hours, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or somebody else, expect a lawsuit. Because once you start negotiating on individual countries on their tariff rates, you undermine the need for an emergency. You can't say there's an emergency, but I'm now negotiating with Brazil. I'm now negotiating with Indonesia. I'm now negotiating with Malaysia on their tariff rate. If there's an overall emergency, it really makes that a hard case to prove that, well, I'm one-off negotiating. They tied themselves in a little bit of a bind here. And so whether or not there's a lawsuit filed in the next 48 hours, I would keep my eye on, because I think that's where they're going to try to undermine this thing. And that's where the speed also comes in. The president's going to cut as many deals as possible because I think he wants to bank stuff. Because I think they'll still pivot. They'll find another way to do this. But going the 301 route or the 232 would have required him to get into a lot more nuance, a lot more reporting, a lot more the rebuttals, etc. And that would have taken longer. He wanted to go big and early. And that meant using emergency powers, which I think is going to be a potential Achilles heel.
I want to show everybody 3 pieces of sound from the morning TV of people, different categories of people defending the tariffs. Lots of skepticism in business. The market's very skeptical, obviously. Big debate about whether we are going to see off-ramps taken, some or many, in the next week. Here is first the vice president on Fox and Friends, 106, please.
And they want to do the patriotic duty of taking it to these other countries, but it's going to hit them a little bit. They feel. What can you tell the American people that they just can't afford an extra $3 here and there? about the government making up the difference from that? Will costs go up at some point? Will this just be temporary? Are we talking 3 months or 6 months?
Well, we certainly hear, and I appreciate, how I grew up.
I know.
I grew up in a family that often did live paycheck to paycheck, and we know a lot of Americans are worried. So we are fighting very hard to bring prices down. We're going to have the biggest deregulation in the history of this country. We're doing a lot of things and already have done a lot of things to lower the cost of energy. You heard the president mention this yesterday. Eggs, when we came
All in
in,
reconciliation.
we're at a 10-year high, and all of a sudden they've dropped 60% just in the 2 months of the Trump administration. What I'd ask folks to appreciate here is that we are not going to fix things overnight.
Yeah.
Joe Biden left us, this is not an exaggeration, Lawrence, with the largest peacetime debt and deficit in
Okay,
the
we can get out of
history
this.
the United States
Now,
of
here's
America,
Secretary
with
Lutnick.
sky-high interest
Here's
rates.
Secretary
We don't
Lutnick,
fix that
please,
stuff
201.
overnight. We know people are struggling.
Dump
We're
out of this,
fighting
201.
as quickly as we can to fix what was left to us, but it's
It
not.
finally did happen, and we got the numbers. Was this reaction, is it overdone, you think, or about what you thought?
Well, I think the long term or even the medium term, you've got to expect the United States of American markets are going to do extremely, extremely well. I understand the reordering of the rest of the world's markets, but they have been taking advantage of the trading policy, the markets policy. All the policies of the United States of America were designed to make you rich and make us poor. Take our factories from us, go build elsewhere. I mean, imagine this. Why are all of our pharmaceutical products, the ingredients to our pharmaceutical products, made in Asia? That's not cheap labor. That's just a failed policy that lets the rest of the world gut America. And that's what Donald Trump is here to address, and he's going to change it, and he's going to protect America for our children and our grandchildren.
Now, one more point, at one point, and then I want to show you one more soundbite. Watch closely who flies to Florida with the president today, because he's going to be in Florida Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. As we all know, face-to-face with Donald Trump gives you a lot more influence. There's going to be lots of criticism, particularly if the markets do poorly today. Who's on the plane with him to Florida? Who's with him as he's weighing how to react to the world reaction? Lastly, Dave McCormick, senator from Pennsylvania, was on CNBC this morning promoting his book, which he and his wife Dina were on two-way to promoting the other day, talking about mentorship. And of course, Dave McCormick was asked about tariffs. My view of this answer, I'll just set it up to say this is exactly the way the White House would like their supporters to answer. And keep in mind, this guy worked at Bridgewater, very, very experienced in economics and global economics. Play Dave McCormick 108, please.
Florida's 6th congressional district, just to talk about one of these special election races.
He looks a lot like Pete
What does it tell
Sessions.
you that
This is not it. I don't know what that was
Texas,
from.
And they want to
Pennsylvania.
do the patriotic duty.
Not
of
this.
Taking it to these
Not
other
this.
countries.
Let's try one more time. Dave McCormick.
Give me 10 seconds, Mark.
All right. Everybody stand by for Dave McCormick. Anyway, they got to promote the book too. Every author's nightmare is your book tour scheduled during a big news week, but they didn't bump them. They just split the interview. A little bit on the book, a little bit on tariffs. Ladies and gentlemen, Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick, happening now.
Three quick things I'd say on tariffs. Number one, the tariffs, we've talked about nothing about tariffs for the last month. The tariff chapter is one chapter in a book of economic policies that's going to include deregulation, energy dominance, extension and tax reform, foreign investment in the United States. So it's important, but it's one thing. And those things should give markets a lot of certainty. Second thing is what the tariffs are designed to do is address a fundamental problem of unfairness. And Mike Froman, I just heard him on earlier. The global trading system has brought great benefits, but it's been inherently unfair to the United States in many ways. China, many other countries have not followed those rules, and it's had devastating effects in my home state of Pennsylvania, my hometown. When I was growing up, the carpet mill had 2,000 employees. It has 200 now. So what's happening here is to address unfairness and also bring back a much stronger manufacturing base in the United States. That's the goal. And the third thing is we are in the earliest days of this and still trying to digest it. I'm still trying to digest it. Scott Besson said yesterday, first of all, what the tariffs were is a ceiling. assuming people don't retaliate. And now there's going to be a series of negotiations that take place. I mean, listen, in my home state, I'm trying to understand the impact of this so I can make sure that the second and third order consequences are addressed. Every country around the world is going to be negotiating this. And the tariff levels, it really is the case. I think Joe just said it. It's not just tariffs. It's non-tariff barriers. It's currency. So this is meant to address some fundamental unfairness. And I think it's too early to pass judgment. I'll say one final word, which is what President Trump has been talking about during the campaign. Everything he's doing, he said, this is about the real economy. So if we can get the real economy where it needs to be through a whole range of policies, that's going to be good for financial markets.
Dan, thoughts on Vance, Lutnick, and McCormick?
It's the best thing they got. I mean, they're going towards the legislative solutions to help the economy, which is to say this is not in the short run. We've talked about this now for a month. It is not in the short run going to help the economy. We can all hope in the long run to reorder the global economy to our maximum benefit. But I said it before, it's the duration it takes to get there and the degree of pain Americans are willing to tolerate. You can't take a factory out of China and put it in Scranton in, under a year and a half. It just takes time. So we're going to see. But that's the best argument they got.
You can't announce you're going to do it, though, which is what the president's counting on. Sean.
I mean, I agree. I think those outside of Bassett, I think Scott, well, actually Kevin Hassett too, but to a different, I mean, those are the strongest people they have out there. Dave, obviously, just background wise, I first met Dave when I was the assistant U.S. trade rep into Bush, and Dave was both first undersecretary and then the deputy national security or NEC, and we traveled the world doing trade stuff. So he knows this stuff, not only his time as CEO of Bridgewater, but like this is Dave's wheelhouse. So he understands this, more than anyone else, not just as a senator, but as a CEO and as a U.S. U.S. official involved in this. Look, the one thing that I would say, and I know that the administration is doing a good job of getting this out, but here's what I wish we did more of in terms of turning the tables. Dan brought this up yesterday in terms of how the Democrats would respond. But I just want someone to tell me right now. I mean, these are the charts that they gave out at the White House yesterday. The EU charges on average 39% tariff rate. Okay, what is our goal? What is I mean, you can go down the list. China 67, Vietnam 90, Taiwan 64, Japan 46, India 52. Those are the average. Some products are much higher. In India, it's over 100. Are we just going to keep letting this happen? I mean, is the answer just, just keep kicking the can down the road. Let U.S. manufacturing go. Let us keep getting, keeping our service providers, our financial services, our manufacturers, our ranchers and farmers from having market access. Because it seems to me that that's the alternative that everyone else poses. What Donald Trump is doing is actually fighting for the first time. And it's going to cause disruption. And if you I watched Hakeem Jeffries out there called, this isn't Liberation Day, this is Recession Day. All right, then you go tell those farmers and ranchers that they're not going to get access to those markets. You tell the manufacturers, you tell the service providers that, again, but at some point, this is like the debt and the deficit. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be painful. And either somebody stands up and does the right thing by America, or we sit back and just keep kicking the can down the road for another decade or two.
The only difference, though, Sean, the only argument I'd have with that is there are numerous sectors of the United States economy that have benefited mightily from the global free trade system of the last 30, you can even argue 60 years. Now, the flip side is some have not, and it's primarily U.S. manufacturing. And that is should be a super important part of this country. And any industry that suffers, we should always be asking, how do you fix it? But to argue that a lot of services industries, the technology sector, the financial services, the pharmaceutical, on and on and on, have not benefited mightily from free trade would be incorrect.
But again, I will tell you this, having done it for 3 years.
We have barriers.
Right.
We have trade barriers.
But no. First of all, we are the easiest market to trade in. We have the lowest, absolute, Dan, I was the assistant U.S. trade rep for 3 years. We have the lowest tariff barrier of any country. That's a fact.
In most instances we do, but that is not true that we don't subsidize stuff. That is not true that we don't. I mean,
okay, but if you want to, those are non-tariff barriers. If you want to get into that, great. Then we'll go into the VAT. We'll go into GMOs. But the bottom line is,
Sean, but
at some point,
you're both right. We're the easiest to trade with, and we have some barriers.
But at some point, when is it that we're going to stand up for these guys? Because right now our industrial base is shrinking. We're not giving market access, and we're allowing other people to have unfettered access. We can keep doing nothing, or we can stand up. But this goes back to everything else, the debt, the deficit, all these other issues where we can keep kicking the can down the road. Social Security, let's just do nothing. Let's wait till someone else has to go bankrupt and deal with it. But at some point, doing real things, exhibiting leadership is going to be tough. And either we can do nothing, or we can.
But Sean, the question is, do you lift up that bottom third that's been a huge loser without harming the other 2/3? And that is your
right. And I do think that, you know,
gamble.
We've tried in the past with trade adjustment assistance, which was a joke. So when factories closed, we gave them a pittance and said, hey, we'll retrain you to do something which no one was going to do. So, and that was, by the way, that was from your side of the aisle, which, you know, just so at some point we might want to try something different. We've tried to let people lose all their jobs in the factories. You heard Dave talk about that in Pennsylvania. I don't think whether it's South Carolina or Georgia, North Carolina and their furniture, everything has gone. And at some point, now, again, I have some issues with some of the tactics that have been used. But overall, the idea that we're finally standing up for people, to me, is something that we should be applauding on a bipartisan basis. If we want to go after the tactic and say, well, we wish we had done it this way. But Mark made this point the other day with one of the folks that came on about NATO. You can disagree with Donald Trump's tactics with NATO. Fair, fine. But the bottom line is NATO countries would not be putting in more to their own national defense if it wasn't for Donald Trump. Full stop. That's a fact. And so you can, like I said, I get that people disagree sometimes with his tactic, but he's getting results.
And if you don't understand the point Sean just made, you don't understand what's going on with MAGA and why Donald Trump's won 2 out of 3 presidential elections.
Yep.
You may feel the disruption's not worth it. You may feel like you're not going to build stuff in America no matter what happens because the pain's going to be too great before factories actually get built. You may think that the Europeans and the others aren't going to cave and it's going to be ugly. You may think all that, but you can't ignore what John said because it's what's driving this. The status quo and the current trajectory is untenable.
By the way, I will say this to your point, Mark. Other countries are, not just the countries, but BMW, Nestle, all these European countries are saying, hey, let's get our tariff down. Yeah. It's working.
Right. And to me, here's the last thing I have to say about tariffs, and then we'll move on unless you guys want to make a point. Everybody in the establishment thinks he's going to take off ramps. Everybody thinks that, right? The problem is he may not, because he may not get offered enough to take off ramps, or he may have a strategy that says no off ramps, because the minute we take one off ramp, no one's going to believe that this is real. I truly don't know what he's going to do, but I will tell you that we're going to know pretty soon whether they're going to be off ramps that are meaningful.
Well, what's your definition of an off ramp? I mean, my definition is if you're at 10 and you come down to 0 and we come. I mean, that's not an off ramp. That's a deal.
Well, it's a deal, but it depends on if countries really, if it's that emphatic. I agree with you. That's effective, but people assume he's going to accept less than that. I don't know. One more thing on tariffs, and then we'll do a few other things. Then we'll get to your questions. Yesterday, we did a little guessing game about what time the president would start to speak and how long he would speak. And that means we could have more than one winner, which is what happened. Roll tape. The president's event's supposed to start at 4 Eastern time in the Rose Garden. Let's take bets, guys. What time will the president begin to speak, and how long will the event go? Sean.
4:18, 37 minutes.
Dan.
4:30, and he can't stop talking until 5:30. He takes questions, and he's defensive, and he's brawling.
All right. That's the other question. Does he take questions?
Sean was almost 100% right on the start time.
I was originally going to go cover.
We don't need my prediction. I lose.
To New York, so I'll be watching and waiting for my 6 o'clock deadline.
I think
they'll delay it an hour.
Stop.
No, keep going.
Sean wins because he got the start time almost exactly right. Dan wins because he got the length almost exactly right. I got both wrong.
Wait, hold on. Time out. Price is Right rules. Dan went over.
Dan went over by like 5 minutes. We don't play by
price. I said 37.
We play bocce rules here.
But what he went
40, closest to the pin.
So
he went like almost 55 minutes, right?
No. I tweeted it out. The woman next to me literally hit the start button. So this was like literally the official timing from the pool. So I sent it around. Hold on. I sent it to our.
He went like 48 minutes, maybe 48 minutes. Dan was closest on length.
Let's just move on. Dan won. That's fine.
Dan won half. All right. Next story is not that Bruce Springsteen has a new album coming out.
48 minutes, 4 seconds.
Yeah. 83 songs, 74 of which have never been fully released in any form.
Wow.
Bruce Springsteen album. You guys have anything to say about that?
I'm not a Springsteen fan.
Yeah.
I know that's
I'm bipartisan on that one.
All right. It's a big deal for many. Election fallout. Second day conversation amongst Republicans about the meaning of Wisconsin in particular and the underperformance by some standards in the Florida races has centered on a question we touched on, but I want to talk about it again today. Put up the vice president's tweet, please. This is what Charlie Kirk on his show has been talking about. It's what the vice president's very openly talking about. It talked about it sort of on Fox and Friends as well, which is what happens when Donald Trump's not on the ballot. The political problem on the Republican side of the aisle is how to get our base to vote in off-cycle elections. We see in the establishment finally accept Donald Trump's leadership of the Republican Party. Now it's time to try to actually learn from his political success. The question, which again, Charlie Kirk and others raised yesterday and this morning is, if Donald Trump's not on the ballot and he's not going all out, because he didn't go all out in Wisconsin, he didn't. How does can the party actually energize people and win elections in governor's races this year and then in the midterms and 28? Sean.
So I said this yesterday. I'll say it again. The party, it's easy. We got 1.6 million votes in the 2024 election. We got 1 million last time. We need to look at those 600,000 people because this would be of all states to do it, Wisconsin's the perfect place. Look at the data and figure out, was it a messaging issue or a mechanical issue? Did they not get out because they didn't know, they didn't care? Or was it that they didn't like the messaging? They didn't like Schimmel. They didn't think it mattered. But we need to go in there and understand why, because it's easy to say it. But if you just have a simple mechanical problem, it's a lot easier to fix. If it's just, hey, I didn't have a ride, I didn't know how to get to that poll. Okay, we can fix that a lot easier than I didn't like the candidate. Not that you can't fix that too, but if it's mechanical, it's just a question of then going in and really spending a lot more money on get out the vote, targeting, whatever. And we've done that. We did that in 2016 and in 2024, really looking at low propensity voters. So there's actually a way to do this. And I hope, again, that instead of throwing up our hands, it's what is it that we didn't do this time? And spend the time really looking at those 600,000 people that made the difference. What
if the answer is he can't be done without Trump on the ballot?
Well, again, then I think we need that's a bigger, again, it's a bigger problem that we need to go in and literally sit down with folks. What we did in 2016, interestingly enough, was we had these groups of low propensity voters who, it was Donald Trump's first run. They weren't sure how he was going to really execute on the conservative agenda. And we did a deep dive on these voters and figured out what were the buttons that would push to say, okay, what's going to actually motivate you, right? Meaning, is it another issue? Is it scaring you about Hillary Clinton? But whatever it was. So we need to go in and actually find out, okay, if Donald Trump's not on the ballot, what would get you to vote? Is it an issue? Is it a call from him? Is it whatever? But that's what I'm saying. You've got to go in and diagnose it because someone will vote. They did it 5 months ago. So why did you do it then and not now? And it can't simply just be because if that's the question you're asking, if he wasn't on the ballot, then does it mean, okay, would 5 calls from Donald Trump, would a rally do it? Then figure that out. That's to me the issue.
Dan.
I think the challenge is it's not just Wisconsin. It happened. Again, they're small, but in Iowa, in Pennsylvania, in those state specials, in Florida, there was some big significant drop off. And the problem, Sean, is it happened in 18. It actually happened in 20. He missed his targets in certain states, not by a huge amount, but they did not quite turn out everyone they thought was going to turn out in 20. And they missed him in 22. So the only times that you've really been able to get these people is 16 when Hillary Clinton was perfect foil to some extent, and 24 after Joe Biden and inflation and so I think for Democrats, there is newfound optimism about the midterms that, we've done it a few times. We did it in 18. We did it in 22. I think you're seeing a couple candidates are announcing this week now. Some top recruits are going to jump into certain Senate and House races. I think the party feels like a little bit of wind at its back.
Pappas,
I will say this.
Pappas got in the New Hampshire race this morning. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the woman in Michigan's getting in, and yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
He's officially announcing, I guess, what, at 5 tonight? Is that?
Well, he actually already sent out an email to his supporters saying.
All right. So
he's raising money.
I think, again, I agree with, I mean, Dan, the one thing I can say is I can explain away Florida just in terms of intensity. Like, you've got a bunch of people who are down there saying, oh, we always win.
Sorry. Hold on. I apologize. Put up the quad split, please, with the CNBC audio. Keep going, Sean, because when we get the open.
Oh, the Dow's going to open here.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, just real quick. I think, look, this is why I say Wisconsin to me is the key, because Wisconsin is a swing state, a swing voter. It won't go away. Florida, you could argue it was intensity, blah, blah, blah. So to me, that's why I think we really need to do a deep dive there.
All right. Stand by. Let's watch this together.
I think that Dale thought that they were going to, they had very positive meetings. Somebody said that. Somebody said very positive meetings with the president.
But Jim, we may still be waiting for exemptions. We may
Boy, tough day to be ringing the bell.
Chris Ruddy.
Oh, wow.
More uncertainty.
Congratulations to our friends at Newsmax.
Because they're making them chips in Arizona. That's their pledge. And because the president said that they're too important for AI. So you can knock NVIDIA down all you want, but NVIDIA, they did not, the Taiwan tax does not apply to them. People should know that. I'm trying to figure out who's taxed and not taxed, okay?
Let's get the opening bell here and the CNBC Real-Time Exchange. The big board, it is Newsmax celebrating its recent IPO. Shares back down to 44 and change pre-market. At the NASDAQ, Liani Sewell, a provider of machine vision products in China. Celebrating an IPO today.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That's what we need. Good China.
So Jim, one argument has been that maybe the market's not down as much as some feared because they do think these can't possibly last. You buy that?
Look, I think there are a lot of people who feel that you can negotiate this back down to where you don't have a trade imbalance, and so therefore you could do better. That's possible. I mean, in the old days, you would just call the equivalent of Kelly Ortberg, and you say, "Listen, I want to buy 300 everything you have Boeing," and then you call the president, and it used to work. I don't know if that can still work.
Well, I don't know if it worked when the Chinese agreed to buy our grain and then never followed through.
They didn't follow through. They didn't follow through. You know, a lot of this has to do with the idea that the president just is.
All right, turn the audio down. Leave it up. Leave the picture up. Let's keep watching.
You know, Mark, I was going to say one challenge, because I agree with Sean, kind of the Main Street, Wall Street. It's actually a pretty good political fight because there's more people on Main Street than Wall Street. Is that a lot of people on Main Street have pensions and 401ks and other things that, just as you talked about Tesla, like, good luck attacking it because most people own it. How do people feel when those statements come in at the end of the month if they're down, 7-8%, and then the next month they're down 6%? What's your pain threshold?
By the way, just as a non, I told you I got a D in economics, but what this says to me is if you got money, buy today, baby.
We'll see.
This is not financial advice. Let's just say it now.
Yeah. All right, real quick.
You know what you're getting.
Kill the audio out completely on that, but leave the video up. Just real quick, guys. I want to run through three things, like short answers, and then let's bring folks in. Elon Musk, I'm reporting yesterday, he's leaving. Of course, he's eventually going to leave. Sean, I'll just set this as the over-under. Is he gone by July 1?
Okay, so here's where this gets tricky. The SGE, the special government, has a 130-day window, but there's a way. So we'll know before. Like, I actually think he's either gone.
Is he going to be working is he going to be working in Washington? Most days a week by July 1? Yes or no?
I think yes.
Yes,
honestly,
okay. Yeah, I'll take yes for an answer. Dan, is he here after July 1?
No.
Okay.
Mike Waltz, is he National Security Advisor?
But Mark, can I just real quick? I want to just say, like, the threshold.
What answer, Sean?
We're going to know before that, because he's either going to extend the 130 or double it.
Yeah, but he could extend it and then leave.
Right, but if he extends it once, he's going to stay.
Okay, you're both on the record. Sean says he'll be here after July. Dan says he won't. Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor after June 1. Sean.
I think if yes, I think if Mike Waltz is
Okay.
national security advisor on Monday, he's there in June 1.
Okay. Dan, is he national security advisor after June 1?
I agree with Sean. He's either gone by Monday or, a week from now, or he's still here.
Okay. Eric Adams announced today in a 6-minute video that we'd show you some of it. It's so boring that he's not going to run for mayor as a Democrat. He's going to run as an independent. I can tell you that the short-term impact of that is almost certainly be to see Andrew Cuomo go higher in the polls because he's going to get, I think, most of what Eric Adams was still getting. My question to you is, will Eric Adams be on the ballot as an independent candidate, get the signatures, raise the money, stay in the race in November of this year? Sean, yes or no?
I'm going to say soft yes. I don't know the New York the ballot access issues as well as you guys probably do, but I think yes.
Okay. Dan.
Yes, he stays on. Agree about Cuomo, but watch now for a third candidate. If the black vote stays with Adams and Cuomo and Adams savage each other over scandals, it's how Barack Obama snuck through in Illinois. If somebody goes positive while those two go negative.
I will tell you, I'm intrigued. I was blown away last week by the report both of Cuomo's, whatever you want to call it, inappropriate relationship with an aide. And then secondly, the COVID stuff with Citi Field. I know Mets fans are probably pissed, but the idea that didn't resonate more, and maybe it did in New York and just not, in the DC political world, but
none of it's sticking. It's all kitchen.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I couldn't believe it.
You're right. We're validating your view from Virginia. You're absolutely right. All right, John, welcome in. Tell us where you are, what's on your mind. As always, peace, love, and understanding. And we'll keep watching the market. So just leave that up. John, again, welcome in. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, John, real quick. My answers. Musk will still be here. Waltz will be gone. Adams will not be on the ballot. John.
Hi there. How are you guys? It's exciting to be on. I've been watching a long time, but this is the first time that I'm a
grateful to have you.
Participant. Thank you very much. So my question is, I am a longtime Republican, but I was not a Trump voter in 2016 and 20. But I did vote for him this past time because of mostly the alternative and the direction that things were going. And I am starting to get a little nervous. And, I believe that Trump's support, I guess it's really tight MAGA support, but then he won the election because people like me who are maybe a little bit on the fence, he got a wave of that support. And I think the question is he going to be able to hold on to it? And what I'm nervous about right now is when you see things like this happen, the market downturning, all of this reaction, we didn't really expect this rocky of a start. But then what you start to hear is, oh, but Trump has a master plan. Like, oh no, he expected all this to happen, even though I don't believe that we really expected all this to happen. So that was really part of my question is, how many folks, I guess, in the know think that this is like a master plan? He knows exactly what he's doing. This is all going to work out in the end. And, the markets, which are important to me right now as getting close to retirement age, I'm kind of really relying on, your kind of retirement counts, continue to go up. And I'm always willing to deal with short-term bounces like this. But I just, from a global perspective, there's a lot of nervousness right now and a lot of skepticism that this is like an actual master plan, because that's often what Trump supporters say is like, every time things don't go like he said, oh, no, it was always going to be this way. This is exactly what we knew was going to happen. And I'm just not sure if that's actually true.
Okay, John, hold on. We'll get Sean and then Dan in. You see the S&P is down about over 3, which is more than other markets. So more than the overnight trading in the international markets. We'll keep watching. Sean.
I get your point. I mean, that's politics. You claim victory, no matter what. Trump probably does it better than anybody. I think on this tariff thing, though, I will say, I think he's going to stick with this thing. This is not everything I heard in the last few days about how this was going down, like and frankly, if the funniest thing about the way the market's going today, I think this will validate what he says. See, it wasn't as bad as you all said it was going to be. So we need to stick with it.
Dan.
Well, John, I totally agree with you about what decided the election. I've said this now consistently. It is that middle 5 to 10% who did not sign up for the wrecking ball of Doge, and they did not sign up for kind of tariffs to the extreme like we're getting now. And so we'll see where they go. And I actually agree or disagree a little with Sean. I mean, look, he's a day trader. I don't think he has a master plan. We heard it on tariffs. Like even his own staff was telling the press, like, we don't know. There was no comms plan. There was nothing because nobody knew. So I think he lives for the perception of strength, action, and winning. That's it. He defines it however it is. Up is down, black is white. He will just bulldoze his way through. And a hat tip, he's often successful.
John, thank you. Grateful to you for joining.
The funny thing is, John, real quick before I go, like there was a report earlier this morning on one of the channels about all these major companies basically going to their heads of state or head of government and saying, hey, you got to make a deal. Like if he can rack up a bunch of these things and show at the end of this week, the end of next week, that other countries have taken their tariff rates down, that's going to be a huge win for the country.
John, thank you. Appreciate you being part of two-way. Thank you. Vice President said in that Fox interview that there's going to be an agreement on TikTok before the deadline in a couple of days. No deadline extension will be needed. He did not get pressed on what the deal would look like. I doubt he would have said.
By the way, what I loved about what he said about that was he reiterated the national security concerns that TikTok has, which again, I was afraid, to be honest with you, that they were going to sell this thing out. And he made it very clear that we continue to be concerned about Chinese spying, et cetera. And so I will say that I'm very skeptical that the Chinese government care that there's a buyer. That's what I don't get. They did this for a reason. The only thing that I will say, just for the record now, is that I think if China sells TikTok or allows it to be sold, it's just because they have another app waiting to screw us on that.
Well, the reports are those servers are not going to have to be separated.
Yeah. Dana, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
I'm in Los Gatos, California. So John just talked about trepidation, and the market obviously is scared, quote unquote, scared. One thing I think the Republicans have done a bad job on is scaring people on the debt. I mean, when I search the internet, maybe my numbers are wrong, but 5 years ago we spent 4.4 trillion. Now we're spending 6.7 trillion. You people tell me we can't, no matter what Doge does, or even these tariffs, you really can't get a balanced budget unless you look at entitlements. But there's no way entitlements went up $2.3 trillion in the last 5 years.
No, it's COVID and the two big Biden spending bills.
Yeah, but we don't have COVID right now.
Well, I know, but some of the spending's still going on.
Dana, so this is the Washington trick, is that if your budget is $10 this year, and because of COVID, we gave you 50, made it 15, then your new baseline is 15. And if you cut below that, that's a cut. This is a beautiful Washington game that gets played, that whatever your current baseline is what your next budget is based off of, not what it should be. So, and that happens in the DoD budget as well with, with
time out, Sean. I got you. I understand. But I now rest my case. The fact that you have to explain it to me and to everybody is my point. I think the Republicans should have done a better job explaining the delta. This is the way it was.
That's Ron Johnson, baby. This is what he has been preaching.
And now why on Liberation Day am I bringing this up? Because to me, on my trepidation meter, the deficit is like a 10.0. And even more than this tariff scare right now.
Jordan, Dane, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think Trump knows that, feels the same way. Why, if this is so obvious to him, this imbalance of tariffs, why didn't he do it in the first term? And I think the reason is there's much more at stake now, or he's willing to take a bigger risk now in his second term than he was in his first term. I think the floor of what could happen here is very low and risky. I think the ceiling's super high too. And I think he's willing to bet on both for different reasons in his second term than his first. And my final question, I guess, is like gun control. If you say, well, what would happen if we took away all the guns? People say, well, just look at some other countries. How did that turn out? So I'm curious. I'm also economics ignorant here. Why can't we look at the other countries with the tariff imbalance in the other direction? I don't know the history. What happened to them? Did the sky fall on them? And is there anything to be gleaned by that? Or are we truly, an N equals one, we're different than everybody else?
Well, we are different because we're more open. And we have an economy that thrives because we don't have these non-tariff barriers, which are extremely inefficient, and they punish the consumer. In Japan, there are very limited options for banking and the consumer's punished for that because they have all these barriers for American banks to go in and provide consumer services. On the deficit, you got to raise some revenue, you have to cut some spending. If they're not, whether they're going to touch entitlements or not, and I know the president knows this because I've talked about it with him, the only way to reduce the deficit is robust economic growth. That's it. That's how Bill Clinton did it. Yeah, he raised some taxes. Yeah, he cut some spending, but it's robust economic growth. And he believes that between the tariffs and what's embodied will be in reconciliation, if they pass it, they're going to raise the rate of economic growth. The GDP will be higher. There'll be more tax revenues come in. And that's the way to make a substantial dent in the deficit and the debt. Dan.
Well, I think for all those who keep talking about their concern about debt and deficit, I look forward to your thoughts when the tax bill comes up, because it is a question of how much you're going to add to the debt and deficit, not if you're going to add to the debt and deficit. And I think, Mark, you said it well. I mean, neither party is willing to do what it takes to actually get this done.
Sean, you said before that the president could look at the drop in the markets and say, well, it's not so bad. NASDAQ is now above 4 in the red. What's the number over which the president couldn't say it wasn't a bad day?
Well, I think it's all going to be relative where we end up today. This is where it goes back to what Jim Cramer was saying at the beginning. Do people believe throughout the market trading day that it's not going to be that bad, that he's going to cut some deals, and as it resettles, is this just the initial salvo, or does the thing? But I mean, if it continues to plunge, I think that's not a great thing, right? I think the question is, if it does come back where he was, the initial opening wasn't as bad as people might have thought, it's not going in the right direction, but we're in the first 15 minutes of trading. The question is, I think, where does this end up today? If it continues to go south, that's going to be a much different conversation on the plane ride to Florida than if it just settles down, a point.
I'll be curious too if they try to leak that somebody is on the verge of a deal to try to create momentum, that countries are coming to them and deals are imminent.
Yeah, if they were smart, they'd have 3 deals in their back pocket before yesterday. But
they
Jordan,
did with Israel.
Welcome.
It kind of fell off. Jordan,
welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks where you are who don't know and what's on your mind.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for the question. I'm from New York. I'm calling. Kind of curious what you guys think. I've heard it kind of seems that Bessent was pushed out of the tariff topics yesterday in terms of discussions and decisions being made. That's kind of the sense I got. And then speaking to a few friends who work on Wall Street, their bank analysts also think that Bessent was kind of pushed on the outskirts of that. And also, I was kind of curious if you guys had any color to shed on how the mechanics work on how the Congress was able to roll back the tariffs Trump put on Canada last night, and if that's the same and they have the ability to do that with the tariffs Trump announced yesterday.
Well, the only power they'd have to roll stuff back is if both chambers pass a piece of legislation and the president signed it and they couldn't override the veto. And the chances of that are lower than de minimis. So no, because the House isn't going to pass anything.
Did the Senate pass that bill last night?
They did with 4 Republican votes, but
Oh, they won't
again,
get past the House.
it won't pass the House. And if it did, the president would veto it. I mean, I don't actually think it's a piece of legislation. I think it's I don't know, is it a piece of legislation or is it some sort of resolution? And in any event, it won't impact what he does. And in terms of the Treasury Secretary, I believe he's involved in the conversations, but Lutnick is driving the train. I think if he were driving the train, the outcome would be somewhat different, but not very different because this is Donald Trump's policies, not anybody else's. Sean.
Yeah, I mean, correct on the legislative piece. It's not going anywhere. And also, I mean, he had that's the whole point of using emergency powers. The Congress has already granted him the legal authority to do it. The question is whether it's an authority or not, whether it's an emergency, and that's why I think the courts will be involved. On the Bessent stuff, I think you've got, look, it was obvious, I think, not just Howard definitely won the day in terms of what he wanted, big policy, big sweeping tariffs. But I was there yesterday. Bessent was way out in front on all the shows. They pushed, I mean, he was there probably the top surrogate that they had talking on the shows afterwards, and he was a happy warrior. So if he was pissed, he didn't show it. He was very much a team player yesterday. I think he's I think personally, from what I gather, he probably was a little bit more on the targeted tariff route than the let's go big and wide. What?
He's more for targeted than blanket tariffs.
Well, I'm sorry, Jordan, what?
He was more for targeted tariffs than blanket tariffs.
Well, as I said at the outset, there are trade tools that the president has in his toolbox. 301 investigations, 232s, and I think most of the trade team was like, hey, let's do this in a way that we can prove that we have it. We're more lock solid, and that gives us a greater ability to negotiate, because if we get the emergency taken away, it undermines our authority and standing. And so I think some of those guys were more into the let's do it in a more a systematic way, a methodical way, than just kind of gunning out a big number.
Gotcha.
Jordan, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you for being part of Two Way. All right. We just keep keeping our eyes on the markets as we go through here.
I think I saw that Trump just put a Truth Social up. I saw it flash on CNBC there that, like, to Sean, to your point, I think he says the market didn't go down too much, like the patient didn't die.
All right. Paul will take a look, and if he has it, he'll throw that up either instead of or alongside CNBC. Thank you for that, Dan. Zach, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's on your mind.
You guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. My name's Zach. I'm a moderate Democrat. I'm in the 6th borough, commonly referred to as Boca Raton.
You can buy the New York Post at any pharmacy in Boca.
Well done.
Yeah, and Mark, you just made my day. I've been trying to ask you guys questions for a while. So,
all right, well, thanks for coming in.
I have 2 questions, and I'll make it very brief. The first question is for Sean specifically. As someone who is in the upper echelons of communications for an administration, do individuals coming into like cabinet level get media training? The only reason I ask is I don't want to sound like partisan or anything, but I don't feel very confident watching Scott Bessent. He seems at times very not so confident answering questions. He seems kind of very elitist. So I just kind of want to know if there's any media training for individuals coming in from the private sector to the public sector in cabinet positions. And the next question is for all 3 of you. I'm really looking forward to 2028 for a variety of reasons, but one being that this is going to be the first time since 2008, in my view, where there's going to be kind of a plethora of candidates. So besides kind of the individuals that have been rumored, Dan, who do you think is going to run in the Democratic Party? Sean, who do you think is going to run the Republican Party, with the caveat of I don't think J.D. Vance is a shoo-in for the nomination? And Mark, same question for you, but obviously being the journalist among the 3, I know you can't divulge sources. So are there individuals that you have spoken to that are close to the candidates that are saying he's preparing? The calls are coming out. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Zach. Dan.
On the media training question, the answer is yes. They all go through a murder board and somewhat media training. It depends on the transition, and but I will tell you, even now, the sub cabinet folks they're putting plans together. Some of my conversations yesterday for people to be able to kind of be media trained to go out and do interviews, podcasts, et cetera. So that's coming. But yes, that they do, and each transition is going to handle that a little differently than depending on, but they go through a murder board and some media training. And then they'll each get what they call a Sherpa team, which is somebody leading them up on Congress, usually get your legislative lead. And then there'll be a PR type person that gets put with them. Having kind of been very part of this during 2016, some are better than others, both in terms of the principle, and then some of the teams are better than others. I would just say real quick on my side on presidential, I think this all comes down to JD. How well does he do? Does he clear the field? Will he clear it? Probably not. But there's a difference between somebody running that's just the nuisance run and a credible one. I think, all that being said, I think Marco would definitely love to probably run again. I think Ron DeSantis definitely wants to run again. I think Ted Cruz definitely wants to run again. And there's a bunch of folks that are sort of new on the crop list that are probably willing to take a look at stuff depending on how things shape out. But this is, in my opinion, JD's to lose. And then last, I will just say this on the Bassett thing. Obviously respect your view on this, Zach. I think that Bassett actually, his command of issues and his historical knowledge of the markets, to me, is actually really reassuring because he doesn't come across as some media trained robot that he actually can recite, back in 1964, this was the deal. And I actually have a lot of confidence when he speaks because of his knowledge of the markets and historical background that he brings to the table. So I think sometimes this just happens, your perspective about how you view somebody on television or, even in audio. And I actually get reassured when I hear Scott Bassett talk.
Dan.
Yeah, I agree. Bob Rubin didn't light the world on fire either, but he was calming, reassuring, and knowledgeable. So that's a pretty good set of attributes for a Treasury Secretary. I think J.D. Vance is going to be a referendum on Trump's, third or fourth term. If Trump is mildly popular, it's probably Vance because he's as tight as a tick to Trump. If there's some water coming on board, you'll maybe have some other people who have a shot. On our side, I mean, it's all the names you've heard, the governors, whether it's J.B. Pritzker, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Shapiro, like they're all going to look at it. You have senators like Chris Murphy. I do think Elizabeth Warren will think about it. Amy Klobuchar, some House members. We've talked about Ro Khanna and some others. I think what people will do is I would watch this next fall. Who is an in-demand surrogate on the campaign trail, and the candidates will start road testing messages. They will go to stump for, Mark Warner in Virginia and see if the crowd kind of takes to what they're saying, because you will have a progressive lane, a moderate lane, and I bet somebody who tries to run as a quasi-Trump outsider, and you just have to see who else is in your lane and is there an appetite for that lane.
Zach, here's what I'll say, because we're short of time. A lot of people get talked about who will not run. And particularly when you're looking at these younger candidates in their 40s and 50s, there's lots of reasons for them not to run. They have young kids in many cases. They've got skeletons in some cases. They can't raise the money in some cases, right? Raising enough money is really hard. They don't have great grassroots fundraising capability. And they don't have, the Clinton, Obama level of fundraising bundlers. Putting the staff together is hard. If they've got a current job, balancing running with their current job. If they don't have a current job, how they have a big enough platform to do it. It's very hard to do this. And I think a lot of the people who are talked about, including some of these governors, are so far away from being able to run A-level campaigns. Now, they may say, well, I'm going to run a B-level campaign because B-level may be good enough because nobody in our party can run an A-level campaign. And right now, there's nobody who can. Nobody. Not even Governor Shapiro, who I think is the closest. Not even Governor Newsom for a variety of reasons. Those two guys, maybe, but they're not in the category of a Bush in 98 or 2000 or a Clinton or a Obama even. So I really caution people to not assume that all these people, the dozen or so who get talked about regularly, I caution they may not run. And I don't know who will run in the end. I'd say Amy Klobuchar, I think, is the most likely of all the ones Dan named. Governor McCrory, I'm sorry we're not going to get to you. We're just too close to out of time, and I don't want to rush you, but I hope you'll come back. And thanks to all the other people who raised their hands. Let's just talk about what's coming up. First of all, we'll keep watching the markets. They continue to be down and inching up. how much they're down. I don't know if the president will talk today or not, but again, he's got an opportunity to do something at the White House before he goes on departure or on the plane, or an arrival in Florida, I suppose. Sean, what do you have on tonight?
We got a great panel discussion and just a moment of personal. When we talked politics earlier, I mentioned last week during that PA race, some sources had pointed to a firm called Cold Spark being involved. I've learned that they weren't involved in that race, so just want to correct the record on that. But big panel discussion tonight, and then big chat. Well, hopefully tomorrow. We've got some good tariff stuff coming.
Great, Dan. Anything you want to say before we go?
I'll be on Laura Ingraham tonight.
Whoa!
There you go. The angle.
Be careful.
The angle.
She comes tough.
Yep.
Two more two-ways today. 4 o'clock Eastern time. My colleague Michael Moynihan. As you can see, Mr. Posner, Mr. Forster will join Mr. Moynihan at 4 Eastern time, sponsored by Fire. Great conversation there. Again, if you haven't sampled Michael's show yet, today should be your day at 4 Eastern to watch that. And then I'll be back at 6 o'clock tonight for Two-Way Tonight. I'll wrap up of all the day's news. And amongst my guests will be Adam Mockler of Midas Touch, who's been on before. And if you haven't seen him, you'll want to join for that. Zach, thank you for joining. Grateful to you. We will be back in 23 hours, Dan, Sean, and I, for the last morning meeting of the week. And as always on Fridays, winners, losers, and what to look for. You won't want to miss it. Thank you for watching. We'll see everybody in a little bit. Have a great day.